Today we're going to be doing Photoshop assignment 10. We're going to be making an iPod. So go into the handout folder and there is an instruction booklet here that you can follow through. And I've given you a template that you can start off with. So let's open that in Photoshop. Okay. So here is the starting iPod. Now the first thing you're going to want to do is to create a brand new layer so that you can create your iPod. Call it MyPod. Okay? And what we want to do is we want to make it about this size. So we can use the rectangular marquee tool, or if you're starting to get really efficient and smart at using Photoshop, you would know that you can hold control and click on this old iPod photo and it quickly makes that selection for you. But if you want to do it the old school way and use the rectangular marquee tool, don't let me hold you back. Have at it. Once I've made my selection, I can now make my iPod. So you can use the same color if you would like, or be a little bit more creative and make your own iPod. So I'm going to make mine a blue. So because it is the foreground color, I know that I can hold Alt and press backspace to quickly fill that with blue. Again, if you want to do the old school way, you can go to your paint bucket and fill it with blue. So I now have my iPod. I want to keep this selection made, okay, for the next couple of steps. I'm going to create a new layer, and this is going to be the shadows for my iPod. Now I'm going to reset my colors to black and white. I am going to select my gradient tool and make sure that I set it not from black to white, but from black to transparent. Okay? Now what I'm going to do is, this step is a lot easier if you zoom in actually, because what I want to do with my gradient tool is click on the edge and draw a straight line coming in, just a short distance, so it makes that shadow effect. Okay, and I can do that as well on this side. Okay, perfect. Now I'll stay zoomed in for the next step, because once I've done my shadows, I want to add the highlights. And if you look at what the original looks like, there is shadows right here. Very similar to what we just did, and there's also highlights. So we are going to add these highlights in as well. So going back to my highlights layer here, highlights, that is definitely not how you spell highlights. It is for today. Anyway, here we still have this selected, and we are still going to use the gradient tool, except we are going to click on this little arrow to switch the colors so that it goes from white to transparent. And we're actually going to change the gradient type to a reflected gradient. And again, if you zoom in, it makes this step all the more easy to accomplish. Take this, draw a short line, in its position, and I'm just doing Command Z here to undo some of these until I get the desired effect. Okay. Now we can also change this to something like overlay to make it look more realistic, because it wouldn't be that vibrant if it was reflecting off of blue color. Okay, so I now have at least the start of my iPod. Okay, so I can now deselect the iPod. Now, what I want to do next is make this wheel. So you can do this a couple of different ways. You can do it the old school way and use your elliptical marquee and try to line this up properly. I don't like that idea. Or you can use your magnetic lasso and you can go around there and try to get that, right? That's probably your best method for doing at least this selection. So using my magnetic lasso tool, I will make a selection of the wheel. Now, because I don't want the inner part of the circle filled, what I'm going to do is up here in my options, I'm going to go to remove from or subtract from selection, and I will select the inner portion of that circle. So now I just have this area selected. Okay? Let's create a brand new layer up at the top. This will be my wheel. And I already have my white as a foreground color, so Alt and backspace will fill that with white very quickly. Okay? Now I need to make my buttons. So I'm going to make another new layer. This will be the buttons. Let me zoom in here a bit. Now I can use my polygon lasso tool, go to new selection, and I can start making these selections click, 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 click. Alright, very tedious, it takes a lot of time. I can add to selection and then select all of these. So I can go add to selection and I can click, 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 click. But because I'm all about showing you better ways to do things, I'm going to use this magic wand tool again. Okay? I'm not sure if my tolerance is set properly, but we'll test this out here. So I'm going to add to selection. Make sure it's add to selection because I've already selected a couple of these here. And I will click on this gray. Whoops. Let me undo that. You got to make sure you're on your original iPod if you're going to use the magnetic lasso. That worked quite well. So tolerance of 15 worked for me at least. And I can select all of these different objects. Perfect. Now I'll go back to my buttons layer. And it's a simple edit, fill, and you can select 50% gray, or you can pick a color. Again, it's your iPod. I'm not going to rain on your parade if you decide to customize it. So there it is, and if I turn everything back on, the iPod is coming along smashingly. Looking fantastic. Okay, so there's my iPod, completed. But what I also want to do is let people know that this is my iPod Shuffle, and I also want to create a reflection. So what I'm going to do is click on the top layer, hold Shift, click on the bottom layer, and Command G to group that whole thing. Okay? Now I'm going to create a new layer, and I'm going to put this actually underneath the, not into the group. I actually just dropped that into the group, and I didn't want to do that. So let's move it out of the group, close the group, and there we go. This is going to be my background. I'm going to go like this so I can see the outside of the canvas. It'll make this step a little bit easier. Select my rectangular marquee tool, starting from the top corner, go to the bottom of the iPod, and then right across the whole length of the screen. Okay? That's where I'm just going to cover from the bottom of the iPod to the top of the screen. I'm going to select two colors that I want to use for my background. I'm going to go with green, and I'm going to go with orange. Again, customize it. Have some fun with this. Now I'm going to select my gradient tool again, set it back to linear gradient, and make sure you select this first one here. Now starting from the top, I'm going to draw a line down to the bottom. So it goes from green to orange. Now I want to do the opposite down here. But since I already have this selected, the easiest way to do this is to go select, inverse, and reverse the selection. This time draw from the bottom to the top. Perfect. Command D to deselect. I now have my background. I just need to add some text here. So I'm going to pull up my text tool here, and down here in the corner, again, I don't want to go below the position of the iPod. So select an appropriate font size. There's my cursor. This is my iPod Shuffle. Okay, I might make this one a little bit bigger. Just give it a nice effect there. I can move it so that it's at the bottom. Okay. Very nicely done. Now what we want to do next is actually create a reflection of these two things. Okay. And again, if I put this iPod Shuffle into the group, so it's grouped in here with everything else, it's going to make this next step a lot easier. I'm going to collapse my group, and I'm going to now copy this group. Okay, so I have a copy of it. Now all I need to do is, because I have that copy selected, go to my canvas, press Command T, grab this and simply flip it. Okay, and move it up a bit so it looks like a reflection. One tip that I can tell you is if you're trying to adjust this and it's jumping all over the place, you can use your arrow keys to snug that up nicely and get it the proper distance from the other iPod. Okay, so I'll set it to about that distance. Press enter, and we now have the reflection, but it doesn't look like a real reflection. So we have one final step to perform on this. And what we're going to do is, with that group 1 copy, so that's the one that's flipped, we are going to add a layer mask, very similar to what we did before. Set the colors to black as a foreground, white as the background. Make sure you set this to black and white. And then we are going to draw a line from the bottom to the top to fade that out so that we have a reflection. And that is the completed iPod Shuffle assignment. Go to File, Save As, put your last name in front, followed by an underscore, followed by assignment 10. Go to your desktop, save it, click OK, and as usual, please place it in the Hand In folder.